Non-extending. So this is in a scenario where a piece fails. What happens? Is there extension in the system? So I'll show you a scenario where there would be extension. They call this the European Death X. At least that's what someone told me it was called. So the way that you would tie this anchor, which I don't recommend doing, but I just want to show a point here, is you would put the sling through both of these carabiners, do one twist, clip it in so it's a sliding X. This is a self-equalizing anchor, but if one of these fails, carabiner or the bolt, look how much extension, I don't even know if this is on the camera, but literally it extends all the way the length of the sling, and then it will shock load this whole system. It's going to put an extreme amount of force onto this bolt, and I'll explain that concept really simply here. So if I had my fist up against a wall and someone said push, start with your fist on the wall and push as hard as you can push a certain amount of force. Now if someone says start back here and then push as hard as you can, you're going to produce way more force. Same thing with this carabiner. If you have all this force and then extends and hits the end of the anchor, that extension is going to create way more force. It's going to demand a lot more out of the material, the carabiner, the fixed gear, whatever rock it's clipped into or drilled into. So non-extension is really important. That being said, the common sport climbing anchor that is a quad. And I built one here out of a 240 sling. I know usually they're built out of 180s, but the quad actually does have some extension to it, right? Like if a piece fails, it will extend until it hits that knot, okay? The reason why I think most of the community is okay with that extension is because it's not a significant amount of extension, and there's so much built into this system that there's a lot of material. It's double backed a couple times, which doubles the strength depending how you tie it, and it's usually used on fixed gear that's quite sturdy, right? So that's why I think they allow for a little bit of extension. There's also some benefits in the multi-pitch because you can have equalization. There's just a bunch of benefits to it, but you are compromising a little bit on the extension when you're using this. There's one more I'll show you really quick that allows for extension, but I mean, it's kind of green light in some scenarios, is you would just take a 120 sling, tie an overhand in the other. And then when you clip these two, you would just twist one of them. That way, if one of these strands gets cut, the other one's still okay. And throw a couple carabiners here. This is like a baby quad. It's just a duo, if you will. But it's self-equalizing off of these two, and if something fails, it just lands on that knot. That's an okay one. And honestly, you could rock up with. I would use a bigger sling if I'm climbing all day guiding, like a thicker nylon one. But you could rock up with this kind of pre-rigged and be ready to throw it on fixed gear that's parallel like that. Importantly, sometimes these anchors are offset, so the bolts will unfortunately not always be right beside each other. They can be in really weird configurations. We'll get into that more later, but that's important to note when you're just thinking of this ideal scenario that the top of every climb is two beautiful bolts and everything's perfect, because it is not always like that. But now you have the ways to assess it. So ideally, you can make compromises here, right? It's like art or taking pictures or whatever. It's like, I mean, obviously your life's on the line, but the important thing is if you're compromising one of these, you're doing it consciously. Okay, this has some extension, but I'm okay with this amount of extension. Okay, this looks like this bolt is a little bit weak, but I'm okay with it for this lower. Okay, this isn't perfectly equalized, but these look like strong bolts. You know, you can make compromises. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but at least you know qualifications for how to assess an anchor. There's more you could assess it on, but these are like the the triage, the vital signs of an anchor. And the next module, we're going to talk about options and common anchors. So what I've seen just with my climbing outdoors. And yeah, we're going to get straight into that. So next module, here we go.